Welcome to Channel's Business Globe with me, Juliana Olayinka, coming to you live from just outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. Coming up on today's show, the Casablanca Stock Exchange is making headlines with its launch of equity derivatives, aiming for emerging market status. I caught up with the CEO of the exchange for an exclusive interview for more information. And the Reform Party's surge in the UK local elections has shaken traditional politics. What does this mean for major parties? That's what I put to our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, after over 3 years of negotiations, the UK and India have finalised a landmark free trade agreement. This deal significantly reduces tariffs on various goods, including cutting whisky and gin tariffs in India from 150 to 75%, with plans to reduce them further to 40% within 10 years. British exports like cosmetics, medical devices and airplane parts will also see tariff reductions, while 99% of Indian exports, such as textiles, food and jewellery, will face no import duties in the UK. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called it the most significant trade deal since the UK left the EU, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed it as ambitious and mutually beneficial. The pact includes provisions for both goods and services and modest changes to business mobility, including visa access for Indian musicians, chefs and yoga instructors. Expected to boost bilateral trade by £25.5 billion annually by 2040, this agreement also signifies increased cooperation and shared economic growth between the world's fifth and sixth largest economies. The deal awaits ratification by both governments.
Mr. Speaker, he's got no answer, but he couldn't even bring himself to say something. He couldn't even bring himself to say something to the 250 people who found out that they lost their job this morning. The fact is, pensioners are poorer and people are being laid off. From winter fuel to net zero, his energy policy is a disaster and everyone knows it. We know it, the public know it, the unions know it, his MPs know it, even Tony Blair knows it. His only answer is to go further and faster in the wrong direction. Why should we all suffer because he won't admit he has got this wrong?
Mr. Speaker, of course nobody wants to see job losses, but she should address her comments to the tens of thousands of men and women in this country working on renewables for the future of our country and tell them that she doesn't want that. That is anti-growth, anti-jobs and anti-working people. But every week, Mr. Speaker, she comes along to talk the country down, to cart from the sidelines. She can't even bring herself to celebrate the deal we've done with India. They took 8 years fiddling around and got absolutely nothing. We've delivered the best deal since we left the EU, the most ambitious deal for India, which has been measured in billions of pounds into our economy and thousands of jobs in the country. She should be welcoming that.
Elsewhere, the UK local elections have delivered a seismic shift in the political landscape. Reform UK made substantial gains, taking control of several significant councils, including Durham, Lincolnshire, Staffordshire, Kent, Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Lancashire and West Northamptonshire. Reform also won the closely contested Runcorn and Helsby by-election by just 6 votes, a dramatic upset in what had been a solid Labour seat, marking Reform's first by-election victory. Dame Andrea Jenkins became Reform's first regional mayor, winning in Greater Lincolnshire. Reform further consolidated its national presence by becoming the dominant party in numerous councils and securing over 475 council seats. Well, in the wake of these results, Kemi Badenoch apologised for what she described as a bloodbath after her party lost over 600 council seats. To unpack these developments and their implications for the UK's political and economic future, I earlier called up with our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so it's been a couple of weeks since I managed to catch up with you. And my goodness, so much has happened. When we last spoke, Reform, I wouldn't say it dipped, but I think kind of Elon Musk has sort of bashed Nigel Farage on Twitter. But alas, they've done absolutely amazing in the local elections. Explain what the local elections are in terms of UK politics. Also, Kemi Badenoch, she hasn't fared well in the result, has she?
No, not at all. I think to explain the local elections, They are local council seats, so they are not seats that are translated into this place behind us. They are to sit on council boards and to local county councils to sort of manage the area around the local area. So they are important, an important bellwether to see the political mood that the country's in, but to translate it into what's going to happen here is a little bit harder. And what we saw was Labour and the Conservatives shifting a whole load of seats towards this new party that's called Reform. Some people would say that it isn't that new because it's Nigel Farage and his cronies, and he's been around in many guises for decades
many
now.
years.
It's changed names, but it's still got the same kind of ethos, which is anti-immigration, control of
Pretty
borders,
right-wing.
and slightly right-wing. And what they've taken is they've taken now a control of 10 county council seats. They've got 2 mayoral areas, so these are quite important in the local electoral picture, and they've got 1 more MP in there because of a by-election
Sworn in
that they
earlier
won.
this week.
Absolutely. So
Significant.
they had a great night, and I think now that what's important here is how the other parties look at this and how are they doing so well compared to us. What can we do to try and win voters back when it comes to a general election? And generally the mood of the country, they seem to have something that we don't.
It's a seismic shift.
It's a seismic shift. One, I'd say it's quite easy when you're an opposition party, and I'd say the Conservatives aren't really an opposition party yet because they've been in power for 14 years, so the people think that a lot of the problems in the country at the moment are still down to them. So they can't really be a new party with new ideas because they've just been in for 14 years. The Labour Party obviously have been in for a while now. Things to the ordinary voter don't seem to be getting better, so who do they go to? The Lib Dems, well, the Lib Dems had quite a good night, but we saw the Reform Party that have not been around for very long. Obviously, they're going to collect a lot more seats than they had before because they haven't been around for a long time. So I'd say the key issue was immigration. And actually just today, we've heard that the cost of immigration, or the cost of housing immigrants in hotels,
Pretty decent hotels,
is going to triple. And that is an argument that I think Reform are very well positioned to take on, because Labour and the Conservatives never really dealt with it, spent a lot of money. Labour cannot do really anything because it means leaving the European Bill of Human Rights, which doesn't really fit with the Labour ethos to do that. Reform are saying, put them in tents. You know, they seem to be...
Or send them back.
Or send them back, and they seem to be catching the mood. Whether that's actually enforceable is another matter, but they seem to be, as a party in opposition, they seem to be catching that mood. And I think at a local electoral level, there are local issues, and one of them is potholes. Every single year, it's the potholes in the roads. Seems to be 50% of electors really worry about that. This time, it seemed to be immigration, and a lot of
fuel payments.
Winter fuel payments, which obviously the Labour Party have not done well on, and a lot of Labour MPs will say we let ourselves down there because that's what a lot of older people are concerned about. But it seems to be borders and immigration, and that seems to be what has caused Nigel Farage and his party to do so well. How are Labour looking to fix this? Well, just today in the House of Commons behind us, they came out and said it's going to be a crime to climb on the statue of Sir Winston Churchill behind us. Now, that kind of thing is what Reform do well. They are patriotic, they look at the country, they fly the British flag, the Union Jack, and they say, yes, we're proud to be British,
Keep our war memorials alone.
Enough of all this wokeness. So I think you might start to see, this is what we've seen Kemi Badenoch starting to do herself, or she was quite good.
To the populist opinion.
Try and bring over those people from the right. It's going to be very hard for both. And the Conservatives had a terrible night, and Kemi Badenoch had a terrible night, and she came out and apologised to her MPs, to her voters. I think you've got to feel sorry for her in a way, because they were always going to have a terrible night. Not only were they just kicked out of the Parliament and general election, but also they did so well at the last local elections that the swing of seats away from them was always going to be terrible. Kemi Badenoch is not Boris Johnson. There is not a huge populist movement towards her.
She's not Rishi either.
She's not Rishi. She gets it right sometimes, in PMQs.
She's a smart lady.
Yeah, she hits the right notes sometimes, and she's pretty charismatic, and she says the right things. She just doesn't have an issue like Reform have in terms of immigration. She doesn't have an issue yet that is the Conservatives thing. She doesn't have a thing that's, she talks about wokeness and common sense values and being British, and
it's not enough.
Various kind of cultural politics, but she hasn't found that vote-winning thing yet, and I think that's what the Conservatives need, because they're not defined at the moment. They are just the previous party that she's trying to keep together, and trying not to lose anyone to Reform, whereas Reform have their identity, and Labour have in a way, their identity as being the left side. So I think it's very hard for Kemi Badenoch.
You're talking about vote-winning thing. What is the vote-winning thing? Why are reform gaining traction? Not just on X. Some would have said a couple of years ago it's just a social media thing. Clearly it's not. They're gaining support. What is their special ingredient, Simon?
I think that, the Conservatives need to find that. They need to carve that out. In Tony Blair era, it was education, education, education. It was hope. It was let's bring in fresh, new, young faces. You just don't have anything really you can pin on the Conservative Party. You don't really have anything that they are doing that no one else is doing, or anything that they've found that is in tune with the British public. And at the moment, that is what Reform have. They have
national identity.
Reform have kind of taken that from them.
Exactly.
It's a really hard one, I think, for the Conservatives, and they do need to find that because they've had a terrible time at local elections. At the moment, they're going to have a terrible time if the country goes to a general election. She has her moments in there against a fairly bland Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
So maybe popularity-wise, generally she does come across as maybe a stronger Prime Minister than Sir Keir Starmer. And obviously it doesn't help that Sir Keir Starmer's getting on well with Trump, generally, because she could then leap on that and she could, say we would be doing deals with America now. But so she doesn't really even have that, so it's a tough one for the Conservatives.
It is a tough one. Sorry to sneak this in, but I've got to ask about Prince Harry because that was trending whilst I was in Nigeria. What's going on? He appears to have lost any shred of sort of empathy that anybody in the British public had towards him.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing quite well with his court cases.
He was.
And now he's lost this one, the final one that he can have.
Yeah, it's about security.
And it kind of cuts him off. He says, well, we're not able to come to the UK safely now. Well, if he does come over now, he's kind of going to have to eat his words, isn't he, with his children and his family. And it's a tragedy, really, because, that interview was kind of, it seemed like a last gasp attempt for him to reconcile with his family. I don't know how he goes about doing that now. Yes. Now there's so much water has gone under the bridge. He said so many things in books and Netflix documentaries.
And he keeps on talking.
Yeah, he keeps digging himself a hole, doesn't he? And unless anyone reaches out from Buckingham Palace here, I don't know how that changes, because he seems to have played all of his cards, and with his family at least, none of them seem to have come back. So I guess at the moment the status quo is you went to America to sign your books and do your Netflix deals. Have fun over there. This is where you've made your home now.
Pay for your own security.
But it's hard, isn't it? Because at the moment it doesn't look like his family, his children are going to grow up in the public eye at all, which is the decision he made. But it looks like in some ways he kind of wants that back. He wants to have those royal connections. He wants to still, have his family connections. Obviously he'll have friends over here as well, but he just doesn't seem to have played it so well.
So true, so much has happened. Please, next time, don't stay too far away from me. Come with me to Lagos, Simon. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, the Casablanca Stock Exchange is making headlines with its launch of equity derivatives, aiming for emerging market status. And I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, reporting from just outside the Palace of Westminster in central London. In a moment, I'll be sharing an exclusive interview I conducted with the CEO of the Moroccan Stock Exchange. But until then, here's a breakdown of some of the biggest business news stories of the week. Shell is reportedly working with advisors to evaluate a potential acquisition of rival BP, though it is waiting for further stock and oil price declines before deciding whether to pursue a bid. Such a takeover would be one of the biggest deals ever in the oil and gas industry. US meal delivery firm DoorDash will buy Deliveroo in a deal valuing the British rival at about £2.9 billion. The company said, banking on their combined reach and local expertise to take on competition. The Casablanca Stock Exchange has launched its first equity derivatives product, marking a significant step in its bid for MSCI emerging market status. The introduction of equity index futures is expected to enhance access for global investors and is part of a broader initiative to deepen market resilience and broaden the investor base. Mr. Tariq Sanhaji, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. Unfortunately for me, we're not in Casablanca.
Yes.
We're in London. In fact, we are in a quite iconic region within the financial district of the city. Talk to me about what you're doing in London this week.
So this is our flagship Morocco Capital Market Days, or MCMD. So this is a mission that we do every year to London. So why London? As you said, it's a global financial powerhouse, and it's also the first provider of foreign investors for Bourse de Casablanca. So it is important for us to come here, meet our international investors. And it's also an opportunity to talk about our news and hear also a lot about what are the trends.
Our viewers will remember a couple of weeks ago, I actually filmed a special edition of Channel's Business Global from Marrakesh, reporting on GITEX. Lots of innovation, lots of startups, of course, lots of tourism in Morocco.
Absolutely.
Could you just give us a snapshot of what the Moroccan economy is like today?
Sure. So I think you captured the spirit of what we are trying to do. So Morocco is lucky we are in a geographically strategic position, and we want to take advantage of that position, and also maybe our own let's say social features of being an open country with the open people towards the world, having a big community, a Moroccan community outside, but also having a lot of foreigners. So we want to position ourselves as a hub within the overall world trading. Auto industry and aeronautics is now the biggest export of Morocco. We've gone in a big way in renewable energy. You've talked about the tech and the startups. Last week, His Majesty just launched the construction of the new high-speed train, 400 kilometers from Casablanca, Rabat to your beloved Marrakesh. So, and obviously, all Africans love football, Nigeria particularly. The World Cup in 2030, I hope the Eagles will be there, is something as well to showcase towards the world what we can do, whether in terms of big projects, but also tourism and all the services that we can provide. And that's the momentum that we are building to develop our country.
Absolutely. The stock exchange, the Casablanca Stock Exchange, is gaining lots of attraction and attention from international investors. It's been surging recently. Talk to me about that. What is behind this surge?
Sure. So I think it was important to put the Casablanca Stock Exchange at the center and at the service of the real economy. Maybe a few years back when COVID was there, it was a chance as well to take stock and try to think what's good and what we are not doing enough. And we noticed something that was actually pretty common view, that the stock market was good, but it was intimidating. So it was really important for us to flip, if you wish, that view and say, no, actually the stock market is accessible and it's useful. And so we spent a lot of efforts to try to put the stock exchange back to where it belongs, at the center of the aspiration, the economic aspiration. And I am happy today that we have a lot of youngsters who believe in the stock exchange and say, well, when I start my company, I want to float it on the exchange. If I have some money, I'm not going to put it in Bitcoin, I'm going to put it in Moroccan stocks. And that's actually the shift in mentality, which has allowed us to have a big shift in actually the appropriation and the volume. So the volumes, as you said, they've surged more than 80% over the past 18 months. The retail participation has quadrupled over the past 4 years. Institutional investors, foreign investors, very active. 30% of our investor base are international investors. And I think that single factor was putting the stock exchange back at the service of the real economy.
Was that deliberate?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. As I said, we kind of, it was important to sometimes, take stock, and because crises are generally the best points where you really look yourself in the mirror and say, well, am I doing really what I should be doing? And so the COVID crisis has been a catalyst for a new way of looking at things, a new way of communicating, a new way as well of thinking about ourselves. And so we changed a lot of things within the exchange, and 2 years down the line, that's where the dynamic started catching up.
You're seeing the fruit.
Absolutely.
What are some of the standout performance indicators over the past 12 months, would you say?
Sure. So In 2024, the main index has gone up 22%.
Wow.
It's up 19% this year. In terms of the market capitalization, we are at a record 900 billion dirhams, so that's roughly $95 billion. In terms of percentage of GDP, we've exceeded 60% to GDP. Internet trading or e-trading now constitute 65% of all trading. So the technological aspect, you've talked about GTEx, and the technological aspect as well has helped us. IPO, CMGP, so it's a water management company, and we know African countries, we have the same. We have issues with droughts and water management. And so this IPO of this company past December was the most successful IPO in terms of number of investors for the past 15 years. So the good times are here, but we shouldn't be complacent. It's the time to feel all the trust of all the people who trust us and push on, bring new products, try to be as well much more at the service of the real aspirations of the economy, and that's what should push us for the remaining.
You spoke about stock exchanges being intimidating, and they're
Sure.
intimidating everywhere in
Absolutely.
the world. I presume this is why you've embarked on reforms. Can you talk to me about some of those capital market reforms
Sure,
and how they
sure,
are reaping
sure,
benefits?
sure. So some of the most important reforms have been really about the way we communicate ourselves. So in the past, we used to bring investment professionals to meet companies. Now we bring CEOs of companies who are listed.
Yes.
And that's something that has made a huge difference when someone
Why?
Because, you know, we African countries, we believe in the community.
Yeah.
So when you have a banker who doesn't behave like you and you don't really feel he is like you, talking to you, you don't really want to follow him. But when you have someone who's been your neighbor, who has been your competitor, who is managing
Understands
a company,
the nuances.
exactly, and manages the company that looks like yourself,
Yeah.
but over the past few years, because he's been listed, he's making 10 times or 20 times bigger than you, then you say, well, if he's doing it, why am I not doing it? And that's something that has made a huge difference. We don't have a lot of IPOs necessarily, but the quality of the IPOs have been outstanding in a way to communicate that if you are ambitious and you don't want the constraint of borrowing from a bank, there is no better tool, no freer tool than to come to the market. We don't ask you for any security.
Yeah.
We don't ask you for any mortgage. We don't sit down with you in the company. You manage the company any way you want. And that's something which is quite surprising for some CEOs. They think, oh, I didn't know that the stock exchange is actually this
Accessible,
easy to
yes.
this easy to access and follow me. So when you bring like them companies which are like them, and they manage to do some things which are wonderful. Like we have a company which listed, and then they went out and bought like the biggest sardine maker in the US. And you know, Morocco is big on sardines, but to go and buy a US company is quite a big leap.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, how did he do it? And actually he managed to do a capital increase through the stock exchange a month after he bought the company. And because he was listed, he had the financial power to go and do something which he wouldn't have done by his own means. Once you start taking those examples, then people follow you and people listen to you a lot more.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.